I'm Callie from CRK Training. You're watching our weekly video show, and today I have a special guest who is the expert in one of the most important topics for us as riders and for our horses, and that is saddle fit. So it's a big topic, it can be a complicated topic, but today I would like to bring you Dr. Joyce Harman. She's the author of The Horse's Pain-Free Back and Saddle Fit. And Dr. Harman was one of the first people to really start talking and publishing about saddle fit. She is, like I said, an expert in the field and one of the few people that teaches about saddle fit that isn't also affiliated with a saddle company. So she really is, she's been called kind of the Consumer Reports of saddles. So I did this interview a few weeks ago, and I have one little apology before we start it, because I was solo as I was setting up the camera rigging and interviewing Dr. Harman for this interview, and I must have screwed something up when I tried hooking up the mic. So we didn't get very good audio on this. We've patched it up the best we can, but Dr. Harman's information is so good that I wanted to still share it with you, but you'll have to excuse the little bit of wind noise in the background as you watch this interview.
I found that I would keep going back and the horses would be sore in the same place each time, so I started saying there's got to be something like a saddle causing it, and I was blessed to find some people who knew a lot about saddles to start to teach me. And as I began to learn about saddles, I realized this was a huge can of worms and really one of the largest contributors to performance problems in horses.
Yeah.
So then I became obsessed with it, and then I wrote the book.
Yes. Now, when did you write the book?
The English book came out in 2004. It took me about 10 years to write it.
Wow.
And the Western book, I think we got out in 2008. If the horse is objecting every time you bring the saddle out to put it on him, well, you can kind of start right there. But sometimes it's a little more subtle than that. And sometimes you really have to look at your performance and say, you know, I've checked the bit, I've had the chiropractor loosen up their neck, I've done a lot of things, and I'm still having the same issue.
Yeah.
You should be going back and looking. So the first thing we'll do, actually, is to look at a saddle that is not on the horse, essentially a saddle pre-purchase exam. And that's something that most of the time we're actually doing saddle post-purchase exams, which means you have the saddle already, and now you're finding out there's a problem. So what we want to do in the pre-purchase exam is to look at the saddle for symmetry, and in the book I go into great detail about that. The saddle is the same on both sides, and if this is an English saddle, how big the channel is, and that the channel is even, or the gullet space. We also want to examine the saddle from the top to make sure that it's even, because if the horse feels something uneven on the bottom, they're not going to move evenly. So they may turn left fine, but they can't turn right. When you look at the bottom of the saddle, you'll see that one side is larger than the other, and so it's tilting the rider in an incorrect direction. If the saddle's even on the bottom, but there's an unevenness on the top, or with the position of the stirrups, then it's the rider who becomes unbalanced, and the horse feels that unbalance, and then they can't perform.
Yeah.
So the very first thing is look at your saddle off the horse. The next thing is to look at the saddle on the horse, and the first thing I'm going to do here is to put a tree on a horse, because most people have not seen the inside of a saddle or what the tree looks like, and the tree is really the framework of the saddle. So the bars, the point of the tree, which you're going to see underneath the saddle, it usually has a little pocket, has to run and lie parallel to the horse's actual withers. And you notice that I'm putting the saddle behind the shoulder blade. That's the most important thing about fitting a saddle, is all the weight needs to be carried from behind the shoulder blades to the last rib. So the last rib comes right about here on her. And we don't need any pressure on the last rib. So you can see how the tree conforms to the shape of her back. So now we have a saddle. And the truth about saddle fitting is that the principles are all the same no matter what the sport is. English, Western, jumping, roping. The big difference is that with roping you have to have a horn, and with jumping you don't want a horn. But other than that, the principles are the same. We need to support the horse along the back. We need to have good clearance of the spine. And we need to carry the saddle on the rib cage. And we need to have the girth line up with the narrowest part of the horse's belly, which is usually behind the elbow, but it can be as much as 4 or 5 or 6 inches behind the elbow. Depends on the individual horse. So we want our billet to drop straight down into the narrowest place on the chest. The rear billet, or if there's 3 billets, the billets that are behind the first one, can angle forward, and that will be fine. But the first one needs to go straight down to keep the saddle in place. While we have the saddle on the horse, we want to look at the balance of the seat and find the point that is in the center, because that's where the rider is going to be. If the saddle's too wide, the center will tip you forward to make you slide to the front of the saddle. And if the saddle's too narrow, it's going to make you slide to the back of the saddle. But there are certain things, many things that you actually can fix. The one you absolutely cannot fix is if the saddle is too narrow. That's just like having shoes that are too small or too narrow. The more socks you add, the worse it gets. So if the saddle's too narrow, new saddle time. If the saddle's too wide, and it's a little bit too wide, we can very often put some shims or some extra padding towards the front. So the scenario of the saddle being too wide is that it's tipping down to the front. Again, this is exaggerated for this purpose. And we're going to add a little bit of a shim to lift it up and balance it. If the saddle's way too wide, it's not going to be stable because the angle of that point of the tree that I was talking about will be totally different than the angle of the horse's withers. And so the padding becomes very difficult to try and accomplish. And sort of the old coat hanger idea is kind of a little bit crude, but you can take one of these flexible rulers that you buy at a stationery store, and then you can actually make a template by measuring the horse across the back and then putting it onto a piece of cardboard. And I show people how to do this in the book. And then you can make yourself basically a little miniature horse's back that you can carry with you. It's not perfect, but it gets you in the ballpark. They are a great step in the right direction of creating new modern ideas for saddling. Treeless saddles are wonderful from the horse's perspective. The problem sometimes comes with the riders, because you don't have, with a treeless saddle, you don't have a place to sit that allows your legs to hang easily down the side. So if you have a wide horse like this one, and you have a little bit of thickness, like I do here, in your thighs, you end up riding a barrel. And this horse and me do not do well in a treeless saddle. Somebody with a long, thin leg might be able to ride this horse in a treeless saddle very well. But if they had a really round, one of these kind of quarter horses that's really round, or a giraffe kind of horse, even they would have a harder time being balanced. So it's a mix. And a lot of times people will feel very insecure in a treeless saddle And that's because their hips are spread too far apart.
Yeah.
And they either have to tip forward or they have to tip back in order to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And so the horse will feel that imbalance too.
Huge thanks to Dr. Harman for taking the time to do this interview and share her knowledge with us. I'd like to invite you, if you have any questions or if you have any experiences that you would like to share about finding a saddle or fitting a saddle to your horse, go ahead and put it in the comments below. And as always, if you're watching this anywhere besides crktrainingblog.com, that's where the best comments and the conversation always happens.